Good afternoon and welcome to the 5th Annual Deep Valley Book Festival. Thank you for joining us today for Imagination Goes Wild, the Fantasy and Science Fiction Writers Panel discussion. This discussion was pre-recorded so you can stream it in the safety and comfort of your own homes. We appreciate you helping us to make this book festival a success despite the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Kiersten Hall and I am one of the co-publishers at Pointe Publishing. We're joined today by two fantasy and/or science fiction writers to discuss their approaches to and experiences with writing. I'll start by introducing our panelists and then we'll launch right into our Q&A. If you have any follow-up questions for any of the authors, you'll be able to find their contact information on their respective author pages on the Deep Valley Book Festival website. First up, we have Catherine Sullivan. She writes science fiction and fantasy. She couldn't find enough stories with girls as the main characters when she was growing up. So now she tends to write stories where girls are the explorers, the wizards, and the ones who solve problems and rescue people. T. Erin Sisko blends contemporary Afrofuturism with high-concept sci-fi and down-to-earth characters and believes the best science fiction uses fantastical settings and unorthodox concepts to make poignant commentary on present-day issues. All of his works are fairly short. This is largely due to his television background, which required him to hone his skills at painting big pictures, so to speak, on a small canvas, and a childhood spent devouring the comparatively short works of Edgar Allan Poe. T. Erin Sisko currently resides in Minneapolis, where he watches a lot of Star Trek and Doctor Who, and tries unsuccessfully to keep his cat Zelda from walking on his keyboard. A fun fact, T. Erin designs all of his own book covers. All right, so we have 12 questions. I don't know if we'll be able to get all through them, but I've had, because we have 45 minutes to get through these. So they're gonna be quick answers, but if you wanna follow up with the authors on any of the different questions, you can always get a hold of them through their web pages on the Deep Valley Book Festival website. Okay, so the first question up, describe a typical writing day. So Erin, if you want to go first on that.
Sure, well, a typical writing day, depending on what type of project it is. So if I'm halfway through a work, then it's a little bit faster, where I'm just kind of like plugging in the outline, where I go back, I read what I wrote the first time, or read an existing draft and then try to improve on it. If I'm starting at the beginning, or I don't like what I wrote previously, or if it's a brand new work, then it's a little bit more of a free write, just sort of like dumping out all the ideas, not necessarily like chaotically, but just kind of like, okay, I have this nugget, so let's just write some things I want to happen at some point. And then I kind of go back and turn that into an outline. So a typical writing day is a little bit, little loose, little free form, kind of like jazz-ish, but not anywhere near as cool.
Yeah. All right. And Catherine, how about you?
Typical writing day, like Erin, it basically depends on if I'm doing something that I've got a deadline on. I'd like deadlines, those are good. Because that way I go upstairs to the writing room where I don't have my bird trying to muscle in on things and concentrate on writing and going back and correcting it, because sometimes you need to lead in and say, oh, I didn't quite like that last segment. And it's just a matter of, if I don't have a deadline though, I'm usually hanging out downstairs with the bird and just coming up with some ideas and putting them in the files, because my laptop moves anywhere.
All right, so the next question is, what is the most surprising thing you discovered while writing your books? Catherine, you want to start?
Well, usually I do a lot of research for some of my stories. There was one where I was asked to do something with an archaeologist, and that time I basically went through and was reading a lot of the new discoveries in archaeology and discovered the things about Greeks and the fact that a lot of the myths came from the fact they actually discovered dinosaur bones. And just finding little weird bits that I can put in my stories as well.
Okay, well, that's a new thing. You see, learn something new every day. This is cool. Well, that's a new thing. All right, Erin, how about you?
I think what's surprised me most, so writing more journalistically and like my nonfiction stuff for like my day job, or like what I came up with and was trained for, it's very kind of formulaic. It's like, okay, I know what the topic is. If it's like a television review, I know I'm writing about this show. I know I need to hit these key elements, mention the cast and the writers and those kind of things. And then it has to have an opinion and I have to support it at the end. With my fiction work, especially spec fiction, I was genuinely shocked at that and maybe this seems like something that more experienced writers know already, but that the worlds and the stories, they do live on their own. And like I would be writing things and actually have no idea where it was going to be until it happened. Like I was surprised that characters that I created, situations that came out of my head would surprise me. And it seems like it shouldn't happen, but I'm like, okay, so now if Billy is walking here, then oh, well, no, Billy wouldn't do that. So, oh my God, Billy's gonna do this. That's crazy. Oh, Billy, what are you doing? It's like, wait, so it's this, that beautiful duality of like creating the world, but also getting to sort of experiencing it and being, not knowing what's gonna come next necessarily. That was a very pleasant surprise.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right. So in that vein, then, is writing easy for you? So, Aaron, is it easy for you?
Ooh, so that's a tricky question. Like the act of putting together the stories and developing characters, I think comes fairly easily for myself. Like I'm always just have lots of weird ideas, but really taking that kind of cloud of chaos of characters and like little snippets and putting that into something that would be worth that, one, that makes sense, and then two, that makes sense to the point that I'd be proud enough of it to let other people read it. That gets a little bit more tricky. And then on the back end, a little bit more metaphysically or philosophically speaking, being satisfied. Like I go back and I know that as a musician, like you're not supposed to listen to your own music, or as an actor, you don't watch your own performances. I read my work a lot, which I guess is a no-no, but like I'm one of my own biggest fans, except that I'm such a critic. So I'll read stuff that I was so proud of when I finished it. And I go back like, oh my God, like, why did I write it like that? And why is that? Oh, this is terrible. And so just kind of, that's really, really challenging. It's like being able to say, you know what, I'm happy with it, and to put it aside and let it be what it is. So yes, with an asterisk.
Yes-ish. All right, Catherine, how about you?
It depends, because most of the time, like Aaron has discovered, the characters live on. I usually get ideas because the characters start bugging me in my dreams. It's like, okay, that's what happened next. And when they stop talking to me, I know I did something wrong. I need to back up and figure out why are they not talking to me anymore? Did I just choose the wrong thing? What should they have chosen instead?
Mm-hmm. When they wake you up at night and go, ooh, yeah.
Either way, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Well, Aaron, we'll start with you again. What is your most interesting writing quirk?
I don't actually, I'll keep it simple and succinct. It's sort of twofold. One, I really like unorthodox names. So in one of my favorite books, oh, that's right, because we can hold everything up because it's video. The lead character's name is Atlas Jazz, which is gibberish, and I just love the way it sounds. So none of my characters tend to have. I also like to remove like any kind of gender connotations from names. So in other books, I have very strong, buff, scary characters, very masculine presenting, that are named things like Ragdoll and Tabitha. So that's a very odd writing quirk, just because it's kind of fun. And then I hate endings. I know that's probably like a no-no as far as like the 5 steps of storytelling. You're supposed to bring it to a close, but I hate because life doesn't end really, or clearly it does, but eventually, but like the story doesn't end. So I like to just say like, okay, here's a slice of cake, but it's not the entire pastry. So that's an odd quirk that, yeah.
Anyway, Catherine, how about you?
Well, a little bit of background. I'm the 4th kid in a family of 5, and when I started writing, I basically had to keep playing music while I was writing to drown out the family in the background. So I listen to a lot of soundtracks, and I will find some really good ones from some of the science fiction shows I listen to, from movies. Every now and then when I'm watching the movies, like, I got to get the soundtrack for that, because that's just great writing music. So I tend to write with music in the background.
Yeah. See, I would probably just start listening to the music.
That's why you do not have singing.
Oh,
Otherwise,
okay.
I start singing along. I have to have instrumentals.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, Catherine, what was your writing journey like to get your first book published?
Oh, this would be a long one because, okay, I started writing when I was 14. So I'd read all my dad's science fiction stories and all the books in the house. And I decided, I can do this. And I started writing and sending out stories and getting a lot of rejects back. And then um, well, when we actually started getting ebooks and e-zines out, I got a number of stories published in e-zines. Meanwhile, I already had a book that I'd been sending out and getting back. And one of the zines were basically saying, oh, we're going to start publishing books. Have you got anything longer than your short stories? Yeah. It took quite a few years before that happened. So the days of carbon paper and post offices losing manuscripts and stuff.
Uh-huh.
It was a long process, but I tend to publish a small press nowadays.
Okay. And Aaron, how about you?
Oh, mine's also somewhat of a long story. I was working in broadcasting, and I wanted to get into more of the fictional side of things. So I was working in news journalism, and I wanted to do narrative. And I had an idea for a character named Billy, and it was going to be this cool sci-fi like series. And so I wrote up a spec script, and I was shopping it around, and I couldn't get Billy to the screen, or couldn't get interest in a way that would stay true to who she was. And so I was, again, shopping it, thinking, all right, well, this might work as a book because it's still spec fic and it's still the same interesting characterizations, just instead of, camera directions, I have to actually write, descriptions and write out the exposition. And with my hubris, I assumed that because I was coming from like television, then of course I could just stroll in to the world of literary publishing and like they'd be more than happy. They'd be excited, like, oh my God, this is great. So then about a decade later, I realized that was not the case after shopping it around. And then that was around the time of, I guess they call it DIY or indie authoring, and those kind of things were just, or I was just hearing about it getting a little bit bigger and seeing people at like comic conventions that had done their own content. And there was a service that did print on demand, so there wasn't a lot of investment up front. And I put Billy out there because she had been a part of my life for such a long time. We've gone through so much, and she was received pretty decently. And I was like, well, I actually really liked writing because there's so much more freedom. I don't have to worry about finding producers to invest. I don't have to worry about casting actors and booking studio and raising all this money. I can just take what's up here and put it on the page and then get it out. And that kind of got me hooked. And yeah, all these years later, me and Billy. I mean, I read it now and I'm like, oh my God, this is so poorly written. But at the same time, it's such a great story. Or not poorly written, but poorly written, not as strong as my later works.
All right. Well, you guys have touched upon this, but what is the process that you have for writing? Do you outline? Do you shoot from the hip? Do you see where the story takes you and you just report on it? Do you start with the main action and then branch out from there? Do you start from the beginning? Do you start from the end? How do you do it? Either one. Who wants to start? Sorry.
It's going to depend, again, if it's something that I'm doing a short story for an anthology. I've already got the main parts, so I need to figure out wherever I got it set on a fantasy story. For my books, basically, I'm a pantser. I start off with a character. And I keep having these characters just tell me, stroll in and say, you've got to tell my story. So it's basically just a character and a situation, and it goes from there. And as I get stuck, then I'll go back and do research and say, what do I need a little bit more about my world? What other details are going to be a little more interesting? And keep moving from there.
Okay, very cool. How about you, Aaron?
It usually starts with either a question or like a scene for me. Trying to think of a good example, and I'm just gonna keep putting these up because they're right here. It's so great.
Definitely.
So like with Big Ass Aliens, it was because I was talking with some friends about the old like Omni magazine and other sci-fi anthologies where it's like, oh, don't you miss those old pulps? They're going to the used bookstores, and like the 10-cent, 25-cent bin is finding these old collections of sci-fi pulp serials. And it's like, I don't really see those anymore. Like the trashy, just sort of like disposable. You go to the airport, you pick it up, you read it, now you're done with it. It's not something to cherish or really dive deep into. And then we just happened to be on the north side of the river in downtown Minneapolis. And when you look south, you can kind of see the skyline of the city. And I was just kind of like, you know, what'd be cool? Like, what if there's an alien invasion to something like this, where we have this beautiful metro area, it's all well appointed. And unlike a lot of the old pulps where they're here to destroy or conquer us, or conversely, they're here to like help us, what if they just don't care? Like, they're so far advanced, they're so big that we're sort of like ants when we bulldoze a forest to make a housing development. Like, no one's thinking about the ants. So what if the aliens are the bulldozers? And so that kind of sparked that. And then I just started writing scenes like, well, all right, if it's going to happen in Minneapolis, I know I want to have something in this neighborhood. And I know I want this to happen. And then this. And I start writing these kind of like disconnected scenes in a vacuum. And then when I finally sit down to actually start writing what will eventually be the narrative, some of those scenes I'll pull in, some of them don't work because the characters don't make sense by the time I get to them. So it really is, it's kind of like that question and then just kind of doing that scatter shot sort of jazz improv. Oh, yeah, I should tell that story because that's the cutest one. My second book after the first one, I was running errands with my oldest daughter, and because kids are awesome, she just out of nowhere, we were like picking up groceries or something. She's like, if you eat a wizard, do you become a wizard? It was just a beautiful, like 4-year, 5-year-old question. I was like, I don't know.
That's a good question.
And then that just kind of steamrolled into like, well, what if we do have human chattel? And what if you do eat someone and you get their powers? And what does that look like? And then there's a lot of things that were happening back in 2012. Thank God everything's calmed down now, right? Like, oh, there's no way. So I was like, let me make an allegory. And so that kind of sparked Dragon Variation, which was my second book. But again, I start with that question, even though in that particular instance, the question wasn't mine, but it was just a interesting question. And that kind of snowballed into...
Okay. And quickly, what was that book again? You said it so fast.
That was a Dragon Variation.
Okay, all right, very good.
Yeah, for those, it's one of my more popular titles. I've adapted it into a comic and things.
Okay.
The fact that it started with my daughter asking about wizards eating other wizards and turning into this like very heavy allegory for race and class in this post-apocalyptic dystopian, like, it's a very cute.
It makes you wonder where in the world she got that question from as you guys were grocery shopping. It's like, did I pass the wizards? Was that by the ho-hos? I mean, the Twinkies? That's funny. All right. So, okay, Catherine, how long does it take you to complete your books generally?
Generally, usually about a year. Unfortunately, there's been a few things coming up lately that I've just gotten stuck on something. So I'm like, if I still get, there was one anthology I was asked to pitch a story for, and I was able to write a story in a week for that one, an anthology. But it depends on if we're talking short works or are we talking longer books.
Yeah. All right. Erin, how about you?
Usually about 3 or 4 months, but I should, like, again, add an asterisk because most of my work tends to be more of the like novella than proper novel. I usually cap out around 25 to 30,000 words or 200 pages. So much shorter content. And really, by the time it gets to the point to be released, that's closer to like a year or so. Because the first 3 months, I've got a completed draft where it's got beginning, middle, end. This is the story I want to tell. And then get it proofed and edited and then kind of go back and rewrites. That whole process really does stretch out a little bit more. But the initial just going from head to page, about 3-4 months. But again, I write really short things. And Catherine's work is incredible. I should take way longer, but it's futile because even if I took 2 years on one story, there's no way I can compete. Have you read Catherine's work?
Next question. All right, Erin, how do you handle writer's block?
Ooh, that's another one I get in trouble for. So I don't, I have yet to experience writer's block. My issue is kind of the opposite.
Real fast.
Yes. I have kind of the opposite problem where it gets so much out there. It's more about clearing the clutter rather than putting something on the blank page, which that's definitely not bragging. It's very awkward, annoying. Maybe I should see somebody about it. But especially once I get about halfway through a project, even if it's an outline form, by the time I know, like, all right, these are my characters, here's what they're going to do. At that point, then I'm like kind of bombarded, or I'm really bombarding myself with like, okay, I really want to see what happens here. Maybe I do this, or this would be cool, or maybe I should phrase it this way, or should I take it, should it be third person this time? There's so many questions. And so it's less of a block in terms of like not knowing what to write, but more of a block in sort of like an embarrassment of, oh, that sounds cocky. Not embarrassment. It's like when you go to Cheesecake Factory and you're like, oh, I'm hungry, I'll stop in for lunch. And they give you like that dictionary that they call a menu.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what's happening. And then you get kind of frozen where you're like, and the server keeps coming back. And so my laptop is my server, and then my head's like the crazy menu. And I was like, shoot, what do I, okay. And then that's more my block in that case. And then what I do is I drink a lot of tea, and then usually try and step away from it for a while and then come back to it. So that's my cure to kind of clear the clutter a bit. And usually by getting some distance, I'm able to sort of like, oh, okay, you know what, there is a lot going on, but I think this will be the best case. And even if it's not, this works, and I'll have to get to the next chapter or get to the end of it, then I can always go back and revise and that kind of thing.
I can relate. I understand what you're talking about. All right, Catherine, how about you?
Well, in the days before the big shutdown, I usually go to the gym, work out, or go for a long walk. And also, I used to be working on more than one story at a time. So if I get stuck on one, I could shift over to, okay, I got stuck in the science fiction story. Let's go over to the fantasy one and work on it that way. And then right now I'm kind of stuck on one because I'm not quite sure if I'm the person who should be telling the story. But I really want to tell this story. So it's a matter of working that out.
Okay. All right. All right, Catherine, then where do you draw your inspiration from?
Okay, for the science fiction stories, every day I go to the astronomy picture of the day. That's put up by NASA, and it's just these wonderful space pictures. And just looking at some of the nebulas and the different star patterns, like, how can you not be inspired from that? Or I'll find a really good soundtrack to listen to and just kind of think on there. Or basically go for a walk and just let my brain work on something.
And then, Erin, besides shopping and eating wizards, where do you find your inspiration from?
Kind of similar. I'm a voracious consumer of content. I watch. I read a lot. I read a lot of novels, read a lot of graphic novels and comics, watch a lot of television shows and videos and films. And because of that appetite, there's a line that Toni Morrison has that's one of my favorite quotes of all time, that if there's a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. And so a lot of times I'll keep looking for something, oh, I like this, but I really want to see something else. I really want to push it to the next. Like, I'm going to stop plugging my books right now. But for example, with questions with what I'm working on right now about interstellar travel, there's a lot of discussion in the news about, like, we're making the giant telescope that's going to go down to Chile, I believe it is, or Argentina, and it's being made here in Arizona. And we're trying to like see further than we ever have to send signals out. And then there's also the privatization of the space race. And I was like, oh, it'd be cool to see something about that. But I don't find that. And so then I started thinking, well, what's the angle? I don't just want to see like Elon Musk or a fictional version of Elon Musk trying to make a spaceship. And so then it goes to the point like, all right, well, it would be really cool if someone did have a story where the way that we're traveling to deeper reaches of space is by beaming ourselves out there. Like, there is no spaceship in this, and that kind of, and so then that starts that little nugget, and then that kind of explodes from there. And I really like a lot of the real world aspects. So again, to kind of like borrow from Catherine, which makes sense because she's amazing. Taking those real world concepts or real world ideas and just stretching them past belief, that's some of my favorite sci-fi. And so that's what I try to do, is base at least a teensy bit in some, at least with the science fiction base, a teensy bit, and like, okay, this isn't impossible, it's just really improbable or implausible at this time, but maybe in 10 years, 10,000 years, this could be something. So having that connection back to a possible reality, that's sort of where I draw my inspiration. So less Star Warsy and more Star Trekky.
Oh yeah. All right, Catherine, out of all of your books, who is your favorite character and why?
I think is Selenola, who's my wizard, and she actually originally appears in the Crystal Throne. But in the short stories I've got in Agents, Adepts, and Apprentices, I've got a couple short stories where she was an 8-year-old who wanted to become a wizard because she could talk to animals and they'd listen to her. And as she grew older in that land, she liked to do a lot of research. She liked to study the scrolls. She liked to talk to the neighbors, dwarves, elves, who basically were going, "Oh, wizards! Why would you want to talk to us?" And I just liked her because she had a very inquiring mind and she would listen.
Okay. All right, Erin, how about you?
Oh boy, they're all so fun for me. No, really, it's Billy. So the lead character of Teleportality, my first book, is medically immortal, and it's a very convoluted stuff. But the gist is, she ends up having to work with a past version and the future version of herself, and the three of them have to work together to, solve some stuff. I don't want to give it away and do some things. But Billy's she's so snarky. And again, being my first, she was where I really wanted, really embodying that Toni Morrison quote about the books I wanted to read. Because I wanted a strong female lead that wasn't subject to tropes. So Billy, she doesn't have a love interest. I mean, well, technically she's dead. She's not even alive. So that'd be really weird if she had a love interest anyway. That's not my type of book anyway. But she's also got all these enhancements because she's been made medically immortal. So like she has impervious skin and she's super strong. And there's at one point she's being choked and she's annoyed because she's like, you can't choke someone who doesn't breathe. Leave me alone. And like she's just so mellow but also such a badass. But like in that true sense, like she doesn't have to show off because she already knows that she's the best of the best of the best. So she's kind of like, I would love to be Billy, but at the same time, no, I like being alive. And we've been together so long and went through so much just to get her to this point. But Billy, yeah, we have a very, I mean, I love all you guys, don't get me wrong, but Billy, we've just been together so long. Yeah, and she's fun. Like she's tough without being cynical, which I think happens with a lot of anti-heroes, especially in the content I consume, where in order to show how cool they are, it's really how callous and cold they are. And Billy cares about things, but she just also happens to be able to, like, break a motorcycle in half if she has to. So yeah, Billy's fun.
Well, that sounds like wonderful. Like I said, I'm going to be buying a lot of books, and I'm going to need more bookshelves. There you go. All right, last two questions. Erin, what is the one genre you don't ever see yourself writing, and why?
Oh, romance, probably, like the Harlequin style. Romance, bodice rippers, like very graphic depictions of physical affections and those kind of things. Just sort of like, it doesn't interest me to read. I mean, it interests me like in general, but like not like as a reader, I'm not really drawn to that type of work. And so I can't really see myself being able to put the creative energy and time into writing it, since I'm so not interested in it. Nothing wrong with that. It's just something that doesn't appeal to me.
Yep.
So I don't think I would be able to do it justice. Like I think if I tried to start writing like a bodice ripper, it would turn into just more of a body ripper and get very David Cronenberg very fast. And so it kind of defeat the whole purpose. Or it would be like too sarcastic and it would just, yeah. So,
Yep.
I mean, kudos to those who like it and who can do it, but I just don't think that's a skill set I have.
Yep. And Catherine, how about
I
you?
felt the same way too, as I can't see myself writing erotica. And way back in the early days of writing, when I tried doing romance stories, I started laughing throughout the whole thing. It's like, it's not working. I do have one romance story out there, but it's a short. It's only available on Kindle. And it's like, and it's in a different time period altogether. And I still was like, oh dear, no, not going to work that.
Last question. Okay, Catherine, if you could choose three authors, historical and or current, to invite to dinner, who would they be and why?
Historical, it's going to be a recent historical. Jenny Kagan, who wrote a lot of really good fantasy and science fiction stories, because she always focused on language, she always focused on different cultures, and she was taken from us all too soon. Contemporary, Tamara Pierce, and also Diane Duane. Diane Duane, I love the way she handles magic. It's not just fantasy, but she has world gates. She has wizards on other planets. I just love those stories. And Tamara Pierce, I've been on panels before with her, and she's writing the same type of young adult stuff I wanted to grow up reading, because she still has all sorts of different fantasy. She's delved into doing crime fighters with fantasy. I just love to talk with all of them. It would just be great.
A dinner that would never end. It would just keep going and going. And it's like, hey, look, it's breakfast. Keep talking.
Yep.
All right, Erin, how about you?
Oh boy. I mean, present company excluded, of course, aside. I think it's a tough one. So Edgar Allan Poe, just because as mentioned in my intro, I was obsessed with Poe as a kid. And it would be great to just sort of have like a Vincent the Doctor moment. It's like, hey man, like I know things suck in the 19th century, but we love your work now. It took a little bit, but you're really cool. But also just to get in his mind, because some of the stuff he wrote wasn't just like the dark, like kind of morose or gothy kind of things. He wrote mysteries and he wrote like very precursors to sci-fi, and he had all these like amazing ideas, and it would be kind of fun to kind of just chew the fat with him. And then Toni Morrison, I just realized my authors are all dead, so it'll be a very quiet dinner. But anyway, Toni Morrison, because she is like one of the most perfect authors and had such a brilliant insight and approach to just the art of writing, and it would be great to pick her mind from an intellectual standpoint, and also just to hear her elaborate on really anything. As a guest at my own dinner table would be amazing. It'll be a once in a lifetime experience. And I think lastly, probably Alexander Dumas. My French is pretty weak, but I think we could stumble through it. Three Musketeers was one of, like, similar to Edgar Allan Poe. I was a very nerdy kid, if my background didn't give that away. And Three Musketeers, that series, like Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo, and it's just the way that he wrote these big epics. It was kind of the equivalent of like these big Marvel movies, but in a book. And there are so many of them, and they're all so good. It would be great just to chit chat, and also similar to like Edgar Poe, just kind of mentioned like, hey, the French Revolution is going to be really unpleasant. Maybe take a vacation for a few months or something. Just give them the heads up about what's coming. It's like, yeah, yeah. I think those three, that would be an interesting dinner. Again, present company excluded, because I mean, as far as like local authors, there's so many great ones. I mean, there's one right here. Actually, I can't tell. Well, people are on the Zoom. On my camera, you're right there. So,
Okay.
yes, but yeah, those three would be fun.
Okay. Well, very cool. And you too would be like, oh, and it's breakfast and it's lunch, and let's just make it a weekend, shall we? And please don't go. All right. Well, that is it for the questions that we have for today. I'm just going to wrap it up by saying thank you for your time, and also to the panelists, thank you for joining us today. It's been wonderful to hear your different perspectives and experiences with writing science fiction and or fantasy, although both of you do pretty much both of those. Audience, if you have any of you would like to learn more about these authors or purchase their books, please visit the Deep Valley Book Festival website and click Author Directory at the top. You'll find a listing there of all the authors participating in the book festival this year. If you click on their picture, it'll go into their entire webpage that's got everything in the kitchen sink about them and how to contact them and all that. And you can buy their books as well. Thank you all for joining us today. Please like and share the video with your friends and family. In a few minutes, the live Q&A with festival authors will begin. The information for that session can be found on the Sunday afternoon schedule listed on the events website. Enjoy the rest of the 5th Annual Deep Valley Book Festival. Stay safe and keep reading. Thank you. Bye.